That's nice and easy. Uh, uh, that thing is heavy. Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Typewriter video series. This is Joe. Hey, I was having a good time last night. Went over to a friend's house, a fellow typewriter conspirator. We had a great time sitting out on his patio late in the evening talking about typewriters and all kinds of things. And of course, it brought up a lot of issues and questions and things I'd like to talk about today. Specifically, I want to talk about manual typewriters versus electric typewriters and creativity. Stay tuned. So during our time we spent together last evening, I had a good time. I brought my little Roy portable typewriter, and Kevin, he brought out, three different machines. So I sat down and threaded up some paper in the Roy and just started typing spur of the moment, spontaneous kind of stuff based on the things that were happening at that moment. So for instance, listening to the distant sound of the North Valley evening traffic and the lawn tractor making its slow crawl across the front yard via the watering hose, proof positive that mankind can, if but for a brief moment in geological history, wrest back the frontier into some semblance of civility. You know, just silly little creative spontaneous writings, not intended for any particular audience, just for yourself, just for the joy of writing. And then Kevin brings out his Zenith portable electric 78 RPM record player from 1951, and we're listening to a 78 RPM shellac record of Tuxedo Junction, some wonderful music there. And he then schools me in the particulars of Philco tone arms and the advantages of shellac records played on an electric diamond needle stylus machine. Wonderful stuff. And then I started talking or typing here about an idea I have for a new video, a project coming up. Anyways, Kevin then brings out his wonderful letter of 22 with a blue ribbon. I type a little bit more thoughts about my little experiment. And then he brings out his Underwood portable from the early 1930s, and he types on here in a purple ribbon, he types and asks the question, what is the line in the sand that defines a portable typewriter from an ultra portable typewriter? And that's an interesting question that we're going to have to work on. And then he types up some stuff about the upcoming June 24th Phoenix Type-In that Kevin and I hope to be able to attend this year, and talking about all the things we want to do. And then he brings out his 1943 Imperial Good Companion typewriter with a British keyboard and a blue ribbon, and it's a wonderful typewriter. We had a lot of fun last night with these typewriters, but the whole lesson here was there was this kind of spontaneity involved with these manual typewriters sitting out on the patio table. They don't take up much room. They just sit there nice and quiet, and we had a great time. And we did start talking about this dichotomy between creativity, manual typewriters, and electrics. So this question came up last night. As we were typing, stream of consciousness thoughts would all of a sudden come up. You know, we would type the thoughts, and then we would stop and chat in conversation for a while, and then suddenly, in mid-conversation, one of us would just start typing while the other person was still talking. And you'd still be listening to them, but you're typing something up that you want to capture before you forget it. And then you stop and the machine sits there and you continue with your conversation. And then a little bit later, you do the same thing, or the other person does it. You're busy talking, and all of a sudden, while they're listening to you, they start typing maybe a sentence or a couple sentences. And it went on like that. The night progressed like that. And we started noticing this, and we asked ourselves out loud even, we asked each other, could you do this? Would you do this with an electric typewriter, even assuming there was an electric outlet nearby, and even ignoring the cost of carbon film ribbons, if that wasn't an issue? Could you permit it to sit in front of you on the patio table and periodically dive in and bash out some thoughts, only to let it sit there once again for some interminable period of time with the motor humming away? Could you do that? And the question was, what are the differences between electrics and manuals that cause the manual typewriter to be, at least in our experience, a much better suited for this kind of spontaneous creativity? That thing is so dang heavy. We started talking about some of the differences between electric typewriters and little portable manual typewriters. And some of the things we thought about were kind of interesting. A lot of this you've probably thought about yourself, but here are some of the differences that we came up with. Well, first of all, size. Electric typewriters, with the exception of maybe the Smith Corona Electrics, the 5 series from the 1950s, almost all of them have a larger footprint than a manual typewriter. You know, the IBM Selectric has a big, huge footprint. Most little portables are a lot smaller. IBM Wheelwriter is going to have a big footprint, obviously, too. So if you're typing out on a patio table in a kind of a personal little setting, it might take up too much room. The other aspect is weight. This IBM Selectric is 37 pounds, heavier than a lot of electrics, but generally speaking, most manual portables are a lot lighter. The electric typewriters are chained to an electrical outlet. You know, you got to think about bringing a power cord with you when you're out there. It's not just taking the heavy typewriter, but you got to take that power cord. So this means that for spontaneous use in places like porches and patios, you know, dragging that extension cord around you is not an impossible feat. It just makes it not necessarily as conducive to spontaneity. A lot more preparation is required. Okay, noisy. So the pre-1980 daisy wheel electric typewriters like this one always have that incessant motor hum when they're turned on. It's not super loud, but it's always in the background, and it can be distracting in a quieter setting. Whereas a machine like this, it sits there perfectly quiet, silent, not consuming any resources as it sits there, waiting for you to get back to using it. Let's think about the cost of typewriters. Every letter typed on a carbon film electric typewriter costs you money. It's like taking a joyride in a car when petrol costs $5 or $10 a gallon. Well, there's places in the world right now it's over $5 a gallon. In the U.S., we love our cheap gas, and that's why we like cars. We like our joyrides. But a manual typewriter, in contrast, with its reusable cloth ribbon, are much cheaper. You don't get a sense of spending money as you're using it, and they fail more gently. A carbon film ribbon will just run out, whereas a cloth ribbon just slowly gets fainter and fainter over time, and it sort of fails gracefully at a human scale. There's also this sense of self-containment. With manual typewriters, especially these little portables, you have a sense that they're entirely a self-contained device. They're not any much bigger than a dinner plate, a little typewriter like this. The footprint is rather small, and it sits in front of you as a self-contained device, and through the agency of your imagination and this mechanical marvel, you can make whole new worlds spring up into existence through the act of creative writing. Now, while that's technically true with electric typewriters, there is the sense that they're plugged into this regional electrical grid service, and that they're somehow therefore not self-contained, that it's somehow a collaboration with you and these impersonal external entities out there somewhere. It's not just you and the machine. These were some of my observations after having used this machine this morning in the studio with the IBM Selectric 2. It's big. Did I say big? Yes. It's loud when turned on, the incessant motor hum. It's louder than a manual typewriter when in use, even a manual typewriter with a hard platen roller like this Roy. The noise of the type ball mechanism is actually louder than I recall. The back of the machine gets really warm, almost hot, hotter than what might feel normal. And there's this smell of oil in the room once the machine has been on for a while. This machine was just recently serviced, but it gives you that kind of smell, the mechanical hot oil smell. You can't easily see what you're writing from a low seating position, like right here. Seated in front of this typewriter, I have a hard time seeing the print position. The print position's a little bit lower than on a manual portable, it seems like. It's not as good as I remember. It's not as good as most portable manuals. You really have to be sitting higher up and looking down on the carriage. A lot of it is this front frame, kind of pretty close to the platen. You have to kind of look down into it. I can type really fast with that IBM. Faster than on a computer, and that's a good thing. And the apostrophe is lowercase, right next to the return button. I love that. I can't move the carriage by hand. I just have this incessant desire when I'm maybe doing a correction and I want to move the platen sideways or something, to get free space to do my correction. You can't move the carriage by hand. You have to press and hold either the backspace or the index key and kind of move the type ball mechanism backwards or forward, sideways, to get an open spot to do your correction. One of the things I've really enjoyed about this video series is the opportunity I've taken to just begin to explore these subtle aspects of typewriters other than their technical means of how they work, but more in terms of how we as humans interact with them as creative tools, how they modify and either enhance or positively or negatively enhance the creative process. I really am interested in this human-machine interaction and sort of the social aspects of typewriters. Here's a question from the previous stuff we just went through. If we assume that there is something special in the way of creative spontaneity with manual typewriters, right? And if such machines, if you exclude those horribly made We Are Memory Makers manual typewriters that came out recently, if we assume that they aren't being manufactured anymore, manual typewriters, and thus we are left with a finite fleet of aging machines, does this imply that this specific kind of mechanically inspired creativity is destined to eventually fade away as these machines slowly age into oblivion? In other words, what we enjoy about the spontaneity of a portable typewriter out on some little patio table somewhere that you can take with you, self-contained creativity, maybe that is a temporary experience in the larger realm of human experience. And 100 years from now, will anybody be able to experience that other than the few remaining machines that still work? So I can sit in front of a little tablet like an iPad, for instance, and I can peck away at the glass screen. And I can make notes in various apps, and they go off into where? Someone else's cloud, someone else's server. On the surface, this looks like a very self-contained object. It's so thick, It has aluminum and glass surfaces, a certain heft and weight to it, a certain quality of user experience. And I can even opt to select to print something out to my local Wi-Fi connected home printer if I want. I can have a paper copy, just like a typewriter, right? I can even tell myself, even though it's not just like a typewriter, it's pretty close, right? Really, though, the main difference is that in the case of devices like these iPads and other tablets, it's not self-contained, and it's not therefore entirely personal. It's connected to someone else's www infrastructure, right? It needs an internet. It needs a Wi-Fi signal, at least to get a paper copy. And you could probably keep one of these in airplane mode and just keep your notes strictly on it, but it's hard to get those notes off of it into somewhere else. And I think that's kind of the essence of it. iPads and their ilk present the impression of being personal. That's the lowercase I in iPad and iOS. They're trying to make it to be personal, but it's entirely the opposite. While manual typewriters present the impression of being the output of some industrial revolution foundry and in the mechanical nature of them, they're really entirely personal, private, and self-contained. This has the superficial appearance of being personal, but it's anything but private and self-contained. Now, as for electric typewriters, it still remains kind of up in the air in my mind because they do exhibit some of the characteristics of both the classic manual typewriter experience, and also you can kind of see where they were going from an electric like this into the computer age, right? They still rely upon someone else's electric power grid in their size, their weight, their noise, their wasteful ribbons. It all speaks to the idea of them being intractably interconnected with a corporate supply chain. It's like buying Polaroid cameras and razor blades. You have to buy them from somebody. They run out all the time, right? They're not personal, self-contained tools for creativity, though they can be, after a fashion, coaxed into serving as such. Plenty of creative person has written a novel on an IBM Selectric. That's not the argument, but they're not intrinsically personal. They are a tool for the mid-20th century office, whereas a device like this ultra-portable Roy was designed as a personal writing device, entirely self-contained. I don't believe the chapter on electric typewriters is completely finished. There is at least one brand of electric typewriter still out there. Now let me give you guys an analogy and a scenario. I have a project in mind. I don't know how I'm going to really do this because of some intrinsic limitations in my personal situation, like I don't really have room for another typewriter. But imagine this. You're living in a country like Cuba. There are no new cars available, we will assume, in this story. And the only cars you can get have been built decades and decades ago. Now, that is kind of the assumed state of the typewriter culture in America right now. Except there is one manufacturer that's still making new typewriters and offering service and parts and support, and that is Swintech. But in the case of our analogy, the typewriter culture seems to look down their nose at Swintech as, oh, those are prison typewriters, right? So here's my experiment. Pretend like you know nothing about typewriters. You know nothing about the typewriter revival. You don't know anything about manual typewriters or their history or their legacy. You're not interested in them. Let's just say you want a typewriter to sit down and write with, and you want to buy it brand new, out of the box, with a warranty, with service available, and with replacement parts available. What is your option? Your option is to go out and spend $200 and buy a Swintech. So I'm thinking maybe I'll do that. I'm not sure because I can't really keep it, and I'd have to find room for it. I just don't have room for it. But That's what I kind of want to do. I want to buy one. I want to go through the entire purchasing process, like buying a new typewriter, an unboxing video, and a whole review of a brand new out-of-the-box electric typewriter. I think it would be cool, right? It's that whole part of the typewriter experience that nobody really talks about much, except for Writing Elephant, the wonderful blog who has a lot of detailed information about electric typewriters. But as far as brand new that you can still buy, I believe the Swintex are rebranded Nakajima typewriters from Japan. Anyways, that is kind of where I'm going with this whole discussion about the differences between manual portable typewriters and electrics and how they fit into creativity. Hope this was interesting to you. Hope it spurred some thoughts. And if you have any reactions or ideas, share them down below. And as always, until next time, you guys have yourselves a wonderful day.